welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, the podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we're going to talk about A Quiet Place Day 1. Now, this is the third film in the Quiet Place franchise, but as would be suggested by the title, this is a prequel to the other two films we have seen thus far. So, A Quiet Place is a franchise that was created by John Krasinski. He starred in at least the first film and directed both of the first two, but I do not believe that he has directed this one, though I do think he has played some part in the writing of the story, or at least trying to make sure that this film really didn't stand out as being completely different from the franchise as a whole. And I think during this movie, there wasn't any particular thing that I thought about it in terms of, wow, this doesn't feel like the first two, or this is completely different and feels like a different world. I think that they did a really good job in making Day One fit pretty seamlessly into the world that John Krasinski had built for this. So A Quiet Place Day One is really following the character, for the most part, of Samira, played by Lupita Nyong'o. Now, when we meet her, we do meet her when she is in hospice care. She is sick and kind of on her way out. And so when we first meet her character, she is really standoffish, kind of abrasive. I think in kind of a way of, I know I'm on my way out and I'm trying to separate myself from having too many connections that might hurt me and or hurt, someone else. And so we get to kind of follow her story along the way. And then at a certain point in the film, we do meet up with Joseph Quinn, who joins her on the journey through the city. And this is taking place in New York, if I am not mistaken, and is essentially following the two of them as they try to make their way through the city as the aliens are attacking and kind of destroying things. Now, I think in terms of the strength of this film, I would say I don't think that this is the strongest one of the three. If I was to put the Quiet Place films in order, I would just leave them in the order that we have seen them thus far. I think the first one was the absolute best. I liked the second one, but I don't think it was as, amazing or as new, obviously, as the first, because we had seen essentially what was going on in that first film. And I think the third one is probably the weakest of all of them. Now, I did enjoy this one, but there were some aspects to the story and aspects to the film that I just didn't feel like made the best sense. And I think that there was nothing really too crazy or different in this movie that we hadn't already seen in the previous two. Now, one of the aspects of the film that I felt like was kind of a weakness to this one, and don't hate me for saying it because I will explain kind of my reasoning behind it, is I really found myself wishing that the cat that Lupita's character has and carries through the film was not in the film. And I don't mean that to say that anything, sort of terrible or horrible happens to the cat. In really my sort of feelings on that are the cat in the film does not behave like a cat. When I think of a sort of horror film that does, the animal sort of situations correctly, I instantly think of like Ripley and her cat in Alien, and how that cat very much behaved like a cat. Anytime that there was this threatening force happening, it was the first to run, it was the first to hiss, it was the first to freak out, as a real cat would. Whereas in A Quiet Place, Lupita's cat is really like, it's basically a doll. It is alive and it is walking around and doing things that a live cat would do, but it's the calmest, most chill cat I've ever seen in my life. Like, there can be an alien 2 inches away from its face and this cat has no response. So throughout the whole entire movie, I feel like the majority of the cat's sort of part in the film was really to push the story forward in ways that maybe they just didn't know how to push the story forward. So it is sort of like a plot helper in some instances, and I didn't enjoy that too much in this one. Another thing that I really felt was kind of not the greatest is that I do think that there were some scenarios where, it's like the end of the world. You have these aliens like going crazy, and people didn't necessarily always behave in the way that I felt. So we didn't really get to discover anything about the aliens as the people would have been discovering it along the way. Really, right out of the gate, we have the government kind of know what's going on and announcing that to the people below. So they sort of already know that you're supposed to be quiet. And you do get a couple of moments where these helicopters, which would be a part of the military, are announcing on loudspeaker, to be quiet, to stay where you are. And so you don't really get to experience that along with anyone discovering for the first time that these aliens are hunting by sound. It just is sort of given to you that way, which is a little bit disappointing. But even after the world, or this city in particular, knows that you are meant to be quiet, there's still a lot of people, making choices or decisions that to me felt like the antithesis of what a rational human being would do if you knew you had to be quiet, in terms of like wheeling their suitcases along the ground or traveling in very, very large packs where obviously people's footfalls and rubbing against each other and clothing sounds and things are going to be much, much louder. So I wish that they had kind of gone about that a little bit differently, but I did really enjoy the fact that we got to see a significant amount of aliens in this film, where we didn't really get to see a ton of them at once in the previous films. Like, they do come en masse in this film. There was also another sort of moment that happens in this one where there is kind of, I guess, a new sort of item, if you will, or a new aspect to the aliens that is introduced in this film, but they don't go into detail and they don't explain it at all. And so I don't know if that is like a setup for A Quiet Place Part 3, which I am assuming is still in the works. I haven't really heard anything in terms of whether they still have a green light for the third film or not. I don't know if the third film also is dependent on whether or not A Quiet Place Day 1 does well in the box office. I am hoping not, because I really would like to see sort of that final chapter if the third one is intended to be the final chapter. And I am hoping that if that is the case, we do get to see this sort of added element happen in that third film as well. I will say I am also kind of hopeful that we will get to see Joseph Quinn's character maybe move forward into that third film or be shown in that third film, because I don't think that we saw as much of his character in this movie as we did Lupita Nyong'o's. I think the majority of it obviously is following her. Not that I'm complaining in any way. I love her. But I think that the movie really sort of surrounded her character. And you did get to see Joseph Quinn, for sure, his character of Eric. But I don't know that we really got too much of him in this film, and I would like to see more. I think he's a really great actor. I will say that something that sort of disappointed me a little bit is that they really put out in some of the trailers and promotional materials that Djimon Hounsou was in this film, and he is, but he is in it for maybe 4 minutes. Like, he is not a main character in any way, shape, or form. It's just kind of showing that he was alive at this point and kind of showing how he ended up where he ended up in the second film, but not in any major detail. Like, he's not really a main character. He is a very side character and doesn't make that much of an appearance in this film, which I was bummed about. I would have liked to have seen him kind of along for the journey with Lupita and Joseph's character and playing more of an active role there. But overall, I did really enjoy this film. I think it was a good addition, but I don't know that this really added anything to the story that really made it stand out as a prequel or gave us sort of anything additional that we couldn't have gotten from that third film. So those are my thoughts on A Quiet Place Day 1. I would love to know what you guys thought if you have seen this one. Subscribe to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.